Around the same time, he quit on the therapy that he was getting from Dr. Fenton. When Dr. Fenton urged him to remain in therapy and told him it didn't matter that he had dropped out of school, and it didn't matter that he had no insurance or money to pay for it, she would make it work, he still chose to quit. Dr. Feinstein offered to help, but the defendant quit. And at that time, the defendant really did not have a relationship with his sister and was not close to his parents. He had no other friends, and he belonged to no group that could provide support, whether religious, spiritual, athletic, scientific, or of any other nature. Eventually, the defendant quit on life. But had he just quit on life, it would have affected him and him alone. Perhaps his parents, perhaps his family, perhaps those closest to him. And that would have been the end of it. But he didn't just quit. He decided that since he was quitting, he was going to take people with him. And so, when you consider the fact that he quit every aspect of your life, and you add to that his long-standing hatred of mankind, his adverse feelings toward people, his desire to be remembered, and whatever mental instability he may have been experiencing, you put all that together, and it led to the unthinkable crimes that he committed in this case. On March 25, 2012, the defendant told his girlfriend, Miss Data, that he could not do what he wanted to do. When she asked him what it is that he wanted to do and couldn't do, he said, kill people. So he told her, because he couldn't do that, he was playing video games as an escape tool. Well, less than 2 months later, the defendant decided to do what he said he couldn't do in March. And rather than continue to use the video games as an escape tool, he actually killed a bunch of people, and would have killed more if he had had his way. Video games were apparently no longer enough, and as one victim put it, he viewed the people in the theater as characters in his video games. In the end, what the defendant did is unacceptable. And the community, through the jury, has determined that he must be held fully accountable to the law. Our community, through the jury, sent a message loud and clear. These types of heinous, horrific acts will not be tolerated, and the defendant will be punished and must be punished severely for them. The defendant's senseless, horrific, heinous acts have needlessly impacted thousands of people. Thousands of people. He robbed 12 people of their lives, and as one of the victims put it, he took life from hundreds or thousands who are still breathing. It is almost impossible to comprehend how a human being is capable of such acts. It is almost impossible to accept that a human being can be filled with such intense anger and hatred and revenge that he is driven to commit these unspeakable acts. Especially considering that the defendant was someone who had never violated the law before, with the exception of minor traffic offenses. It is almost impossible to believe that a human being like that, who had never committed a crime, could have such anger and hatred and revenge in his heart that it drove him to kill and hurt so many innocent people. Think about that. Think about the type of intense hatred, anger, revenge, and other evil conditions drives a person who has never committed a crime to do something like this. By all accounts, many of these young victims who were in the theater were destined for greatness. And those who were a little older were already making this world a better place, a much better place. John Larimer, Alexander Teves, Jessica Gowie, Alex Sullivan, Sully, A.J. Boyk, Jonathan Blanc, Rebecca Wingo, Jesse Childress, Gordon Cowden, Matthew McQuinn, Michaela Medic, and Veronica Mosher Sullivan. We will never know what they would have accomplished. We will never know what impact they would have made in the world. The defendant robbed not only the family members and friends of these victims, but he robbed the world of all the good that these people could have accomplished, all the good that these deceased victims would have accomplished. Some of you made some requests during the last couple of days about things that you, the victims, want the court to order. And Mr. Brockler mentioned this, but I'll mention it again. I cannot order any of those things. I don't have the authority to order the defendant to be placed in a particular facility. I don't have the authority to order the defendant to take medication. I don't have the authority to order no visitations. And I can't remember now what other requests were made. I don't have the authority to do that. We're going to take a break here in a little bit, but before we do, I want to mention that I understand that some of the victims are disappointed in the outcome, and some of the victims wanted a death sentence. But you know, your healing is not tied to the defendant's fate, and you've shown that. So many of you came in here the last couple of days and showed how courageous and strong and tough and how much grit you have. That even despite all the pain and suffering you've gone through, you're not quitting and you're hanging in there. And you're hanging in there and you keep hanging in there and you keep fighting. And you have my admiration. You have my admiration. Because I can't even fathom what you have experienced and what you continue to experience. And yet, you folks are persevering. Let me read a couple of quotes that I took down from some of the victims who were here the last couple of days, because they said it better than I could. The first one reads as follows. My final statement is this, Your Honor. Despite what some self-absorbed, inconsiderate, loveless, heartless killer tried to do, we won. All of the survivors and the victims' families, we are the ones who succeeded. We have all gone through the most difficult, heartbreaking, painful experience we could ever go through. But we are still standing. We did not fall. We came together and became something stronger than anything the defendant could ever imagine. So in the end, we won. Our lives are even more meaningful now after what he has done, because we will live to the fullest extent of life after having survived this horrible experience. And we will live for those that we lost, so that they will continue to live through us. I find that perspective admirable. Here's another quote I took down. Your Honor, we cannot help but believe that his selfish act of killing innocent people in cold blood will bring out the best in mankind. I submit it has. The letter then, the same statement goes on to say the following. There was at least one person on the jury that could not morally take his life, no matter that he has no soul, and we respect that. The outpouring of love, compassion, and support we have felt is proof enough for us that the mankind he hated and wanted to destroy has more good than evil. You know, on July 19, 2012, late in the evening, perhaps early hours of July 20, 2012, the defendant, at one point, before he went into the theater and killed and injured so many innocent people, made a phone call. And the evidence showed that he knew at that moment the difference between right and wrong. He was at a fork in the road, if you will. And he could have gone taken either one of those two roads. Had he taken one road, all of those people in that theater would have enjoyed that movie, would have come out of that movie healthy, happy, and would have gone on with their lives. And perhaps the defendant the next day would have called Dr. Fenton and gotten help. Or perhaps he would have called his parents or his friends. Or perhaps he would have been able to somehow start his life or re-register in school and get back in school, get back in the program where he was as a neuroscience graduate student. But he decided instead to take the other road. He chose to take the road that led him into that theater and killed and injured so many innocent people, and in the process caused so much pain and suffering to hundreds of people, if not thousands of people. And, you know, at least one juror showed the defendant the mercy that he refused the victims that day when he went into that theater. And really, that's not the only contrast in this case. Really, this case is a display in contrast. Whereas the defendant was not willing to be merciful and compassionate to the innocent victims in that theater on July 20, at least one juror gave her mercy and compassion. Whereas the defendant quit on life, the victims in this case to a person have shown the courage and intestinal fortitude to fight and to live while facing much larger problems than the ones he ever faced. Whereas the defendant had a long-lasting hatred of mankind and an adversity to people, the victims who have come in here and addressed the court have shown all that is good about humanity, with some of them even going as far as saying, "We forgive the defendant for the horrific crimes he perpetrated against us." All right, I'm going to stop there and take a break because we've been at this for a while. When I come back, I will issue my sentences. The court will be in recess. Thank you.
Please rise.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is the case of the people of the state of Colorado versus James Egan Holmes, case number 12CR 1522. The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys, Mr. King, Ms. Spengler, and Ms. Nelson, and the people are represented by Mr. Brockler, Mr. Orman, Ms. Pearson, Ms. Stitch McGuire, and Mr. Edson. Before we start, let me give everyone the announcement that I have been making each day this week in case that there are people here who have not heard it yet. I want to remind everyone in the gallery that this is a public proceeding and I want you to feel welcome and comfortable here. That is very important to me. As I have mentioned before, this is your justice system. You have every right to be here. Some of you in the courtroom are victims in this case. You have a constitutional right not only to be here, but to speak at the hearing, and you have been heard at the hearing. However, you must observe proper courtroom decorum. I am sensitive to the fact that this case may evoke powerful emotions. I fully understand that. I have not prohibited emotional reactions. To the contrary, I have recognized that most visible emotional reactions are inevitable and appropriate. What I ask is that you please follow all of the rules of the court. With one exception by someone who is not involved in this case, there have been no issues from anyone in the gallery in these proceedings. I thank you for that. I appreciate everyone's willingness to follow the court's orders, and I ask that